Hey guys, Speed here, back with more counters to 6 of the top meta heroes. These counter picks will allow you to nullify the core strengths of popular heroes such as Antimage and Terablade, so you can climb the ladder. I'd like to let you guys know that we have hundreds of videos created by top pro players on GameLeap.com, so make sure to check out the end of the video for a special offer. Now let's get right into it. First off is Antimage. Antimage is once again a menace in pubs. He often feels unkillable due to blink and counter spell. I'm going to propose a few heroes that either can deal with him in lane or catch him throughout the game. First is Troll Warlord. Troll is probably one of the best carries against Antimage for a few reasons. Troll can deal with Antimage in lane due to his mischance and his ability to become ranged. He can set a very fast-paced game by taking Roshan early into the game and pushing towers very quickly. And you provide the ability to solo kill Antimage at any stage of the game. This is important because Antimage in pubs can typically roam freely and split push any wave that he wants. Next up is Slardar. Slardar is great against Antimage because he can contest him in lane and catch him in the mid game, very similar to Troll. With Greater Bash and Slitherine Crush, you can provide enough damage to zone AM out of lane. Amp Damage is a great spell as well. It provides vision when catching AM so that if he blinks into trees you can still track him. And one of Animage's greatest weaknesses is his inability to fight early. Amp Damage makes that even harder for him. And finally is Meepo. Of course you have to know how to play Meepo in order for this to be a counter, but it's extremely effective if you do know how. Meepo's first item is often Blink, which is great for catching Animage. There's not a lot of mids that can easily solo kill him, but Meepo is definitely one of them. Meepo, similar to Troll and Slardar, can set a very fast-paced game by being able to take Roshan very early and being a very effective tower pusher. And nets are one of the best ways to catch Animage. Even if he has Manta, you can often re-net him and provide almost 8 seconds of lockdown, which is plenty for any team to kill him. Next up is Tidehunter. Tidehunter with Vlad's certainly deserves a nomination for most annoying offlaners to melee heroes. Anchor Smash does an absurd amount of damage in fights, that when paired with Ravage, feels very hard to match in any team fight. My first counter is Razor. Razor is somewhat self-explanatory for why he counters Tidehunter. You're a ranged hero, so Anchor Smash is not nearly as effective, and you drain his damage, so Kraken Shell is pretty much a non-factor. When you have Razor against Tidehunter, you always have an option to kill the hero. In many games, Tidehunter can just do whatever he wants because you don't have the proper hero. With Razor, that will never be an issue. Next up is Huskar. Huskar is somewhat similar to Razor. Once again, you're a ranged hero, and you have the ability to constantly kill Tidehunter at any stage of the game. Burning Spears do way too much damage, and there's not much Tidehunter can do to deal with it. In addition, a great way to counter a teamfight is having some frontline hero that can force him to commit the spell. Huskar is amazing at that. And finally, for a change, is a melee hero. I mentioned Elder Titan in the previous video as a counter to Tusk, and it's similar to Tidehunter. There's not a lot of melee heroes that can deal with Tidehunter or Tusk, but Elder Titan is definitely one of them. With Astral Spirit, you do plenty of damage, even through Anchor Smash reduction, to zone out Tidehunter completely. In addition, your Stomp is one of the best control spells against Tidehunter, simply because it does no damage to Tidehunter in fights, so he'll just sit there for 5 seconds. Next is Terablade. Terablade is still the farming powerhouse he has always been. So how do you stop this beast from farming for 25 minutes? Well, first is Pugna. Pugna is definitely a very popular counter to Terablade, but it's certainly worth mentioning. Pugna easily exposes a lot of Terablade's greatest weaknesses. Similar to Troll, Terablade has a very large magical damage weakness in the early game. If Terablade is forced to defend any tower prior to 15 minutes, he will have no item that prevents him from taking less magical damage, and probably only have maximum of 1500 HP. Pugna easily shreds through this, and has great AoE clear to deal with his illusions. In addition, Netherward can be quite comical against Sunder, because if Terablade tries to perform a clutch Sunder, Netherward will deal enough damage to kill him off in many situations. Following that, we have Timbersaw. Timbersaw has become a popular counter to Terablade in the pro scene, and this is for good reason. Timber obviously does not do magical damage, but you do so much pure damage that you cut through all of Terablade's illusions and take no damage due to reactive armor. Timber is really just the perfect counter to Terablade in pretty much every way. You can tank towers, putting a lot of map pressure, you cut through illusions, and you take no physical damage. This is pretty much everything that Terablade hates. And next up is Tidehunter. Yes, I know I mentioned the counters to Tidehunter, but it's still good to talk about Tidehunter as a counter to other heroes. Tidehunter is just absurd against specific melee heroes. Terablade is definitely one of them. It's very, very hard for Terablade to fight when there's this beast just running at him that takes pretty much no damage and is reducing your physical damage. Because Terablade's damage comes so much from stats, Anchor Smash is even more effective at reducing it. In addition, in lane, there's no way that a Terablade truly contests Tidehunter unless you make a big mistake during Metamorphosis duration. Now we have Sven. Sven feels very similar to Tide in many ways. He is obnoxious in lane with Stormhammer and near impossible to kill due to Warcry. Don't worry, I have a few heroes that can ruin Sven's game. First up is Tusk. I feel like I don't have to do much explaining why Tusk is so good. Tag Team just does so much damage where you can completely ruin Sven's lane. If you do this, Sven will just be a stun bot, especially if he's the position 3. This is really not what Sven wants. He wants to be able to get a Vlad's and build into aura items. So if you can shut down his laning stage, then the enemy team just has a stun. Next up is Doom. Doom can completely ignore Warcry, one of Sven's greatest spells. Inferno Blade, as well as Devour, makes Doom's laning incredible against Sven. There's no way Sven can harass you out because you have great regen from Devour, and Inferno Blade shreds through Sven's high HP pool. In addition, many Sven team comps revolve around one hard carry that is getting buffed by a bunch of stun bots. So if you can Doom that one hero, your fights will be pretty easy. Essentially, if you get Doom against Sven, and then Doom the hard carry on the enemy team, your game should be pretty straightforward. And the last Sven counter is Batrider. Batrider is a great Sven counter as a support or just a core. Sticky Napalm and Firefly make it near impossible for Sven to lane. Warcry is once again completely irrelevant because you're entirely magical damage, and throughout the mid game you can lasso Sven out of position when he's overextending like he typically does. Overall, Batrider just covers a lot of the potential strengths that Sven has in the lane and in the mid game. Next up, we have Magnus. I'm happy to talk about Magnus because I know how many people really hate playing against this hero in pubs. The main reason Magnus can often feel so powerful is that pubs typically last long. So here are some heroes that can help avoid that. First up is Timbersaw. I know I mention this hero a lot, or at least it feels like I do, but it's because this hero is so good against specific heroes, especially in pubs. If you pick it into a Magnus, you can absolutely destroy him in lane because Magnus is a strength hero and Whirling Death is particularly good against that. In addition, there's nothing that Magnus can do to stop you from easily taking towers. This is great because Magnus often needs a lot of farm to get his Blink Dagger and a lot of time to get his carries online. So if you can pressure down all the towers early on and take no physical damage, which is what Magnus typically amps, then you're going to do great. Next up, we have Draw Ranger. As I said previously, Magnus can often struggle against push lineups. Draw Ranger team comps often revolve around push. Even if they don't, Drow can farm just as fast as a lot of Empower cores, especially early into the game. So if you can hit an earlier timing than these Empower cores, you can run down the lanes as 5 and end the game. And finally, I'm going to bring up a support that once again is pretty self-explanatory why it could be good against Magnus. It's Shaman. Serpent Wards is just one of the best pushing spells. You can set it down to any tower and there's pretty much no way Magnus can clear it. If his team comp doesn't want to fight, because they have a Magnus who can often not fight early, then you're going to be able to take pretty much every tower on the map without any contest. In addition, Shadow Shaman is great at zoning specific heroes in lane, and because Magnus doesn't have a reliable stun, you can easily shackles who he's laning with, or you can do a ton of damage to him with Ether Shock if he's laning alone. And last but not least is Dazzle. Laning against Dazzle is frustrating. You can't man up during Poison Touch, and you can't harass because of Shadow Wave. So you might be thinking, what can you do? Well, the first hero that can actually do something is Oracle. Oracle is a pretty straightforward counter to Dazzle. Your Q completely purges Poison Touch from all units. This is extremely effective because in lane, you also have a high range and good base attack time to trade with Dazzle, and because Poison Touch is not an issue at all, it's a very even lane. You nullify one of Dazzle's greatest strengths in lane, as well as trade with him pretty effectively. Next up is Slardar. I mentioned Slardar earlier against Antimage, and it's pretty much for the same reason. You do so much damage that Dazzle's slow sustain and slow tick from Poison Touch don't match the high burst damage that comes out from Slardar. Slardar plus another hero in lane can kill Dazzle from any HP. This is great because Dazzle often likes to chip you down with Poison Touch and then heal back up. Slardar completely nullifies this strategy. And finally is Omni Knight. Omni Knight is an interesting one to me because it can definitely go in Dazzle's favor if you're unable to disengage from the Poison Touch. However, Heavenly Grace allows you to reduce the amount of time that Poison Touch is on you. This is great for trading because not only does it reduce the amount of time that Poison Touch is on your hero, but it also gives you HP regen. With the combination of HP regen from Heavenly Grace and the heal you get from Purification, you can often sustain enough to deal with Dazzle's chip in lane. In addition, Guardian Angel is great against bad juju, and its armor reduction because you completely nullify all physical damage. It's just a kind of nice 1-to-1 matchup where Dazzle amps physical damage and then you nullify all physical damage. GameLeap.com is the most advanced library of pro player guides available that you can use to start dominating your games. With hundreds of in-depth videos and more added daily, GameLeap is the quickest way to improve a lot faster than you would on your own. Click on the link to check out the website and get your membership at 25% off. See you inside.